Hi, this is Pastor Ted Marshall. Welcome to the Last Patrol radio show. Today, it's my pleasure to bring to you Aaron Bergman, frequent visitor to our show and a contributor to our radio shows. And today, Aaron, how are you doing? And tell us what's on your mind.
I'm doing well, Ted. I hope you're doing well, and as well as your audience. I thought it was important that we record a show to prepare our audiences for the 10 days that are sure to follow from now up through Election Day, November 6, 2018. And I, gave this show a working title of the self-fulfilling prophecy, which I will clarify as we proceed.
Okay.
And what has popped into my mind, particularly with the events of this last week, is that we all have to maintain calm, and we all, at the same time, have to maintain a strong level of resolve moving forward as we make our way toward Election Day. And as we were discussing before we began the show today, I believe most people out there are going to either vote by mail or vote early. So I think that a lot of this battle will have been fought well in advance of November 6th. But that is not going to constrain or restrain the left. And primarily, when I say the left, as always, I'm referring to the media in their constant efforts to demoralize us going into the process. It's funny, in looking at the events of the past week, and of course I'm referring to the notion, of this supposed bomber scandal, which we'll get into in detail, coupled with what amounts to a standing army of roughly 20,000 and counting, making its way to our southern border as we speak. I believe that these manufactured crises are the tip of the iceberg, I'm very sorry to say. And I couldn't help but think when I woke up this morning of one of the first things you ever said to me the day we met. And of course, the audience has probably heard on prior shows, of course, we met in your tactical training sessions. And one of the opening statements you made to the class, and I'll never forget this, was the analogy of the differentiation between types of people. And you used an analogy of sheep being the predominant majority of people out there who are just basically minding their own business, going about their business. A second category as the wolves that prey on those sheep, either on their minds, their bodies, or both. And then, of course, a very small segment of society that you refer to as the sheep dogs, or protectors of said sheep from the wolf class. And it can honestly be said this week that, in my humble estimation, the wolves are howling. And that took my mind immediately to the story of the three little pigs, where, the wolf is at the door of the various houses of the three pigs, and he's basically saying, let me in, or I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. And in elections past, Ted, we had the houses made of straw that the wolf could blow over.
Mm-hmm.
We had, by extension, representatives that were made of straw that the big bad wolf could certainly blow in. But I think going into the 2018 election, and it was also true in 2016, and 2018 is very much starting to remind me of 2016. I believe we are sitting in a house that was made of brick, and I don't believe that they can blow this house in.
I like that analogy. You mentioned about what's happening on the border. I'm getting some information from sources out there that I really rely on internal sources. I don't know if you heard this. Of course, you're not going to hear it in the lamestream media, but there's been a Claritin call for all the gangs that are organized gangs and so forth here in America to show up at the border on this side of the border and to attack our own troops that are out there. And this is some intel that's coming from a very, very reliable source. Uh, I'm concerned about this. This could be a catastrophe. This could be something that, if this happens, I'm also hearing that there are gang members that are infiltrating this marching mob that's coming up through Mexico, and they're armed. Um, this is scary, and I think this is on the border of some really horrible civil unrest that could turn very bloody.
Well, I think that is the object of this. If not to truly turn into something really bloody, what they're seeking here is a particular set of optics.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, ultimately they want there to be a confrontation of one sort or another by election day, and I believe that is what lies at the heart of this. I believe that what they want is for us to have a military presence at the border around the time they arrive. And believe you me, they're going to send the women and children out first.
Absolutely.
It's a form of terrorism, Ted.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And everybody who has studied this kind of Machiavellian approach knows that this is part and parcel of the whole George Soros Democrat Party playbook. And it's nothing that hasn't happened before. But what I'm reminded of in that instance, along with the whole false bombing crisis thing that was manufactured this week, of a scene in a movie called Red Dragon, which is the third installment in the trilogy of The Silence of the Lambs.
Yes,
you remember Hannibal Lecter and all this? Well, there's one particular scene that stands out in my mind, which is that Hannibal is sitting with a character played by Edward Norton, who is the agent that captured him and put him in the asylum.
Mm-hmm. In
other words, this is the person who captured him. And Hannibal has this veneer of civility whenever he talks to these people, this kind of mask of civility, as it were. And they're talking hypothetically, and he's saying, well, you shouldn't be extolling my virtues. After all, you caught me. And Edward Norton looks at him and says, well, don't forget I had a big advantage. And Hannibal asks, what is that? And Norton replies, you're insane. And the mask changes, and Hannibal Lecter's face changes, and his brow furrows. And the bottom line of the reason I tell this analogy as a story is that this is our primary advantage going into the election, going into doing battle with the left in general, is that lest we ever forget the fact that they are insane, and what they are doing is insanity incarnate. And the bottom line is this clarion call to local gangs may have gone out, but believe you me, the local gangs here are too busy making money, dealing drugs, and working under the radar. My hypothesis would be that very, very few of them are going to show up at the border wanting to engage with the American military, if you understand what I'm getting at here. In other words, self-interest lies at the heart of all of this, Ted, lest we forget. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is again, go back to the big bad wolf. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. The left has nothing to run on in this election. That is painfully obvious. The Kavanaugh hearings blew up in their face. And the bottom line is that the trend is working Republican. By all accounts, early voting is actually, the Republicans are outpacing Democrats in early voting. This has never happened before, to our knowledge. Now, it may very well have been happening in 2016 with Trump under the radar. Now, take it a step further, as far as a confrontation at the border, I don't believe it's going to be anything major. I think they're going to be looking to get, B-roll video of military people with guns facing off against women and children, like I said, that they're going to send out there first. The gangbangers, the MS-13 people will hang back in the crowd as they are doing now. In other words, they will remain camouflaged because this is all about optics. But as far as whether there's going to be a bloody confrontation, I really don't think they have the stomach for it, Ted. The truth is that there are a few people that they will seek to martyr, but it will be a handful of people. There's not thousands and thousands of people that are willing to martyr themselves for a photo op. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, I think if the situation, if you've got sheep coming up there, sheep that have been fed a bunch of lies and been paid to come up there,
right?
And they don't know, they really don't know. But I really think when you take a look at the people like George Soros and these people behind funding this, the evil that's behind this, I don't think these people are aware of what danger that they could be walking into because of the agitators that are already embedded in them and what their plan of action could be. About anything else, we got to be prepared for it because we can't let them come across our border. We can't let them do like they've been doing in Europe, just walking in. I really think that, and they know this. They know that the president's going to stand up for this, stand up against this, and they're going to do anything that they can to show a terrible light, like you said, the optics of this. And I just don't trust the people that are really behind this. They don't care about those people is the first thing we need to recognize and agree on. They don't care about these people coming up from there. They're nothing but pawns. They're nothing but beyond being a pawn. They're just useful idiots. They have no idea. They've been promised something. They don't know, but they're going to be used.
Well, remember the story I just told you about the conversation between Lecter and the agent.
Right.
These people are insane, Soros included.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe that these optics are going to work in their favor.
Yeah.
My contention would be that the opposite is the case.
Oh,
I think
everything
else,
there. Yeah.
see Kavanaugh, it's going to backfire.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been backfiring steadily for 2 years. The thing that our listeners need to take consolation and heart in is the fact that Trump received over 63 million votes in 2016. 63 million. In the past 2 years, he ran on a platform and he has kept every promise he made during the lead up to that election, wherein he garnered 63 million votes and won, by the way, in the Electoral College 20 out of 30, okay,
mm-hmm.
in terms of states. The point I'm making here is, if anything, I believe that he has exponentially increased those numbers over the course of the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm speaking, of course, of the female vote, the Hispanic vote, the African American vote, the Asian vote, the normal standbys for the left. And that is why they're doing this. In other words, they have been reduced to screaming fire in a crowded theater at this point because they have nothing else to run on. They can't run against his economic policies, right?
Right.
They can't run against his tax strategy, right?
Right.
They can't even run against his foreign policy, because his foreign policy has been a smashing success as well, with the reworked trade deals.
Yes.
Not to mention the doing away with regulations, bringing manufacturing back to the country. They essentially have nothing to run on, substantively speaking. So all they can do is try to upset the apple cart. It's like someone that you're playing in checkers or chess, losing, and realizing that defeat is imminent, and so they flip over the chessboard and walk away.
Right.
That's basically what's going on here, Ted. And unfortunately for them, they can't do that with an election. And they have promised their insane lunatic base that there is this mythical blue wave coming for the past 2 years that I contend never existed. Okay, there was never a blue wave. Now they're claiming that it's dissipating, but my hypothesis would be that there was never going to be a blue wave. It was never in the cards because Trump kept his promises. And He won 63 million votes with those promises. So it stands to reason, what logical reason would any voter have to change direction now if the man has kept his promises, right?
That's correct.
So you look at it logically, there is nothing in the world that would bode well for a blue wave. In fact, I believe quite the opposite, as I mentioned earlier. I believe there's a red wave coming, and I believe that they are in a state of absolute panic over this. And this is why we're seeing these crises, because in the old days, Ted, they could spring some kind of an October surprise, a la the big bad wolf blowing down the little pig's house, and the house would come down.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we built would come blowing down around us. And we'd be sitting there scratching our heads going, how did we let them get away with this again? They're not getting away with it this time. And I give you, as a further piece of evidence, something from just this morning. Did you hear any of Obama's speech in Wisconsin?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, be happy you didn't, because it would have made you physically sick. But I mean, Obama is the most jealous, bitter man in the world right now, even though he's sitting on a pile of money for this book that was ghostwritten for him post-presidency. He's still an angry, bitter man who is incredibly resentful and jealous of Trump because Trump is what Obama was sold to us as by the media. The media concocted Obama. He was a conglomeration of things that they made up. And the bottom line is Trump is the real McCoy. And Trump is more popular than Obama by a large share in terms of overall approval ratings at this stage of his presidency than Obama was. This is the dirty little secret. So Obama's very angry, and he comes out and he makes a speech essentially in a backhanded way, trying to, of course, predictably blame Trump for this whole, what I believe is a concocted fake bombing thing that came up this week. And I was just curious, as I've told you before, I don't read the article, I read the comments. So I went straight to the comments this morning to see how people felt about this little speech that Obama had made. I could not find a positive comment among them.
Wow.
I mean, and these comments were brilliant. They were derisive. They were basically saying the same things I just said in so many words, that Obama was a disgrace as a president. He should never have been in the White House to begin with, and here he is coming out and thinking he occupies some kind of moral high ground to come down off his perch from one of his many mansions that he's bought since he left the White House to criticize our current sitting president. In other words, this too is going to backfire. Now, in a more negative light, looking at the news, there was another horrific shooting in Pittsburgh this morning at a synagogue.
Yes.
There's at least eight people dead, 6 injured, including 4 officers. Gunman's in custody. What's missing from the headline?
The political situation of who that person is.
Well, it's a synagogue, so
right.
Who do you think
it
is?
Also,
I'm sure that Allahu Akbar was screamed
yeah.
before the bullet started to fly. I can all but assure it.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you take all these elements that are coalescing, as it were, in the lead up to this election. The left thinks that this anarchy, this crisis happening everywhere is going to reflect negatively on Trump. I believe it's going to redound positively to Trump. And let's face it now, 2016, would you not agree, was a referendum on Obama? Before we finish with Obama here, would you agree that the 2016 election was a referendum on the 8 years of the Obama administration, yes or no?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Aaron.
Then it stands to reason, does it not, Ted, that the 2018 election is going to be a referendum on Trump, even though he's not on the ballot?
I agree wholeheartedly. And on that, the media, we know what the media is up to. They are really trying to rely on past history And that's when we talked about earlier about the fake blue wave and starting those stories 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, starting about this giant blue wave that's coming. Last week they were backing off that story a little bit, and I think the analogy is correct. I think your finger is on the pulse with this. We got to be careful, though. We still, folks, need to turn out and vote. Huge turnouts is what's needed, and hopefully the also, as you're reporting, the early vote is going well for us. We're trying to keep this country going in the right direction, and as Aaron is pointing out for my listeners out there on the last patrol, is that I know we're a Christian radio station here. I know we're also a variety radio station. We also have the First Amendment, the right of speech, the right of free speech. And this is what we're exercising right here. You may not agree with the analogies that you're hearing, but believe me, we still have the right to say them because we still live in a free country. And I just wanted to get that off my chest. I know there's going to be some negative people out there that say, well, you guys shouldn't be talking about stuff like this. Oh, yes, we should, because we're trying to bring you the truth. We're trying to let you see what's really going on out there. And I thank God for people that have an open mind and open ears. And I really, Aaron, don't want to embarrass you, but I really thank God that you and I have this program, and not only the program, but you and I as friends now are being able to share this information. It's truly a blessing, and I thank you for it, Aaron. I really do.
Well, I thank you as well for the opportunity, Ted. And on that same note, I would add that these things need to be confronted now.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we've talked long and hard on many prior shows about the need to speak ideologically at this point. And Trump has given us the ability to do it, because for the first time in my lifetime since Reagan, we have a president that's willing to discuss things on an ideological level. And that, of course, can be, from a religious perspective, it can be from a sociological perspective, it can be from a pop cultural perspective, it can be from a number of different points of view. In other words, you don't just have to preach to the choir, because we're talking about big issues here. And the bottom line is the doctrine of political correctness has dictated to us for the longest time, almost as long as I can remember, what we can and can't speak to. And those days, I think, are over, Ted. And this goes to what you were just saying about, people might say, oh, well, you don't want to go there at this moment in time, or this isn't the time for this. And I give you yet another recent example from last night.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even really want to get into the nuts and bolts of this bomber thing right now, because I'm afraid it's going to sidetrack us in terms of whether it's legit or not. Let me just encapsulate it by saying it's one of two scenarios. Either this guy is a plant and a fall guy, kind of like a Lee Harvey Oswald type, that's been had nothing going in his life and was selected to try to portray your typical Trump voter, right?
Right.
As a mad bomber who couldn't shoot straight, by the way. None of his bombs go off. I mean, they might as well have been made of paper mache and had the word bomb written on them, or Acme Bomb Company, like something out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon. But that said, it's either that or he's a lone wolf, Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver nut job that bears no resemblance whatsoever to anybody in our movement. Okay, and that's really all I have to say about that subject in general. But where I'm going with this point, and this goes to our response, because basically we have been cowed into not responding. And that is the greatest danger, and it is the greatest aspiration of the left, to get us to accept their nonsense without responding, because A, will be called racist, bigoted, homophobic, or worse still, insensitive. Trump had a rally scheduled for last night in, of all places, Charlotte. Remember the last time Charlotte was in the news,
Right.
okay? A lot of people, including, and I'm almost loath to bring this up, Michael Savage, who I have a great deal of respect for, but I find myself disagreeing with more and more of late, comes out and says that Trump's advisor, whoever it was that told him to go through with the rally in Charlotte, should be fired, and that the optics of this are terrible, and that CNN is going to have the B-roll of the altercation between 4 or 5 white supremacists and the radical left on the streets of Charlotte 2 years ago is going to be playing in the background, and that this is going to make Trump look like an insensitive clod for going through with the rally, and that he should have canceled it. I want you to watch that rally tonight, and you will see just how wrong Dr. Savage was, and how he, despite all his brilliance, fell into that conventional wisdom thinking, that acceptance of a false premise that someone attacks you, but now is not the time to hit back. And I tell you what, that rally, to my way of thinking, was tremendously healing. And I would encourage everybody in the audience to watch it on YouTube when they have an opportunity and see if they do not agree. The bottom line is that we have to respond, Ted. It's not like we have a choice in this matter. It's not like we went out and said, we want to go pick a fight with the left over XYZ. No. The left constantly picks fights, and we're constantly asked to take the high road. And Trump has liberated us from that doxy, that mindset, and we are free to say whatever we're thinking, and we are free to defend ourselves. And I think that that's a beautiful thing.
I do too. Aaron, we need to take a station identification break, and we'll be back in just 1 minute. One.
This is Aaron Bergman, broadcasting from VRM, Veterans Veterans Radio Ministry, broadcasting from WVRM, digital broadcast stations, Zephyr Hills, Florida, Christian Thought Variety Radio.
Aaron, it is a pleasure to have you on our radio station here, and hopefully, our show is a syndicated show with the Last Hill Radio Show, our flagship station here at WVRM in Zephyr Hills. We've been up and broadcasting now, Aaron, for about we're going on 3 weeks, almost a month now that we've been actually on the air broadcasting. So we're learning new things. We're learning how to do stuff here. But Aaron, it is always a pleasure to have you with us. And let's continue with our conversation, Aaron. We were just discussing how wonderful a thing it is to be able to have the freedom that we do have, and the freedom of being able to speak and not being afraid of what we're saying. And we're finding that PC, the political correctness, is really, really detrimental and has been for a long time. But now people are actually seeing through that, and they're starting to get brave again. They're starting to realize that, hey, my voice does mean something. I'm not going to hide my voice anymore. Aaron, just a quick question. A lot of polls that have been going on back and forth. I look at the Drudge Report and some of the other areas, and it always seems like these negative polls are coming up, that this is going to happen, that, is it scare tactics from the mainstream media, or are they just trying to dishearten the true patriots of America that want this country to go good? Is it these polls, these negative polls that they run? First of all, is there any truth to them, do you think? Because I keep flashing back on what all the polls said right up until the last day, in the day of the election, that Hillary, it was a 98% that she was going to win.
I am so happy you asked me that, Ted, because I want you to consider something before I go into my answer.
Okay.
First of all, I want you to consider how polls are conducted, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to consider the climate we find ourselves in. You receive a phone call at home, or for that matter, on your cell phone. You're just about to sit down to dinner with your wife, and it's a pollster. And the pollster wants to ask you some questions about how you're going to vote. You know that people who support our president who support conservatism, who support anything that is not left of center, are vilified, how it is encouraged that they be attacked when minding their own business in restaurants,
Yes, yes.
at the airport. You look at what the media has cultivated in terms of Twitter, Facebook, et al. If someone calls you up and you are going to vote conservative, Republican, or Trump for that matter, and we have already covered the fact that they all are one and the same at this point. Trump has taken over the party at this point. So a vote for a Republican represents a vote for Trump in the common parlance of our time. Would you not agree?
Agree.
Are you going to be inclined to divulge that to an anonymous voice on a telephone?
No, no.
When you look at the Twitter bots and the Twitter lynch mob, the little cowardly weasels that run out and attack anybody that doesn't fall in line on Twitter and basically crash their account, is anybody going to be willing to take an online poll for that matter? Setting aside the telephone example I just gave, and honestly proclaim that they're going to vote for a Republican?
No, we're afraid. I'm myself afraid of if I was to answer a poll like that. When you see those come on your emails, your Facebook pages and so forth, those questionnaire things are, do you support this? Check yes or no. I don't answer them. I stay away from them.
Is it safe to use the term targeting? That we are being targeted. And this goes all the way back many, many years to Lois Lerner and the IRS.
Yes.
Not to mention the Department of Justice. Now, my contention would be that I would not participate in a poll, and I believe that the vast majority of that 63 million plus, which I believe, as I mentioned earlier, has grown exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to estimate that it's now 70 million or 80 million or 100 million. I don't know. But I tell you this, I don't think any of those 63 million have changed course, much to the media's chagrin. And those 63 million didn't participate in polls in 2016. So I think it's, and remember, I entitled the show Self-Fulfilling Prophecy. I think this is a quintessential example of a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, I think that the people who take these polls, who are connected to leftist organizations for the most part, and the media,
yes,
all know what kind of responses they're going to get, if any, and that people that are going to vote Republican are not going to respond. And so they conduct these never-ending polls with the express purpose of them not reflecting public opinion, but reflecting what they want them to reflect, so that they can post them, and as you mentioned at the outset of this part of our conversation, demoralize, delineate the press turnout on our side, basically make us feel that there's no point in going to the polls at the best case scenario from their perspective. So do I have any faith whatsoever in any polls? The answer is a definitive no, because you would have to be crazy in this climate to take an honest poll, or you just have to be armed to the teeth and not worried about any kind of repercussions. I mean, it goes as far as lawn signs, Ted.
Yes, you're right.
I have not seen to this point a single lawn sign for Ron DeSantis, except in front of the library where the polls are. Okay, people are afraid to put out lawn signs. That's how far we have descended down this rabbit hole of incivility. And the bottom line is when Trump's campaign coined the term the silent majority back in 2015, 2016, they weren't whistling Dixie. And I believe that the silent majority doesn't care about polls. What difference does a poll make now? What do I gain by participating in a poll? Let me ask it that way.
We don't gain
absolutely
right.
nothing.
Right.
And what is the downside? Everything is risk reward. to any action, there is a reaction, correct?
Correct.
There is nothing to be gained, and there is potentially a great deal to be lost. And we know we could go into a million examples of business opportunities that have gone by the wayside for people on our side. Myriad of opportunities, attacks. There's nothing to be gained, in other words, and there's everything to be lost. So what is the harm in just keeping quiet, going about your business, not to mention the fact that most of us work, okay? And we don't have time to sit down and take polls all day because we're busy earning a living. That's just another side issue that's worth throwing in here, okay? So if you think about it in those terms, I mean, that's my kind of long-winded answer to your question in terms of how much credibility I put in any polls. And the thing that's interesting is the scenario repeats itself every election cycle, where the polls are incredibly positive for Democrats right up until the very end. And then they start to tighten up a little bit because these pollsters need to make a living too, you see. So they have to maintain some semblance of credibility once the dust clears on the election. But, I mean, I never, ever believed for a minute that DeSantis was trailing a guy like Gillum by 6 points. If that's
I don't
question.
believe that either.
No, not in the state of Florida. Now, if we were in California, I'd give a much different answer to that. Now, the Scott Nelson election, I believe that one's a toss-up. I mean, I would hope that with his record as a governor that Scott will prevail. He should prevail. We all know that. He's got a record, and Nelson has been little more than a squatter for over 4 decades in the Senate.
Great analogy. I love that.
My sense of it is if this is a just world, Scott will win, and DeSantis may win in a landslide. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you look at what DeSantis did in the primary against Putnam, that was a shock, wasn't it?
Yes.
And, of course, as we talked about at the time, that proved irrefutably that Trump indeed has coattails.
Oh, yeah.
Now, let's focus on DeSantis-Gillum here.
Okay.
Gillum, it would appear, is one step away from indictment based on the proof it appears that they have of him taking bribes, plain and simple. Just to put it in plain English. I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds vis-a-vis the Hamilton theater ticket. My understanding is that there are a million other examples beyond that. And that the media is just trying to play it off as one theater ticket to minimize the damage. But the one thing we here in Florida have to keep in mind is they have circled our state. And I'm talking about people in California, people like Nancy Pelosi. People in California are looking to flip Florida because they know they're not going to be able to flip Texas. You know, they remember they were claiming that they were going to turn Texas blue. You haven't heard the name Beto O'Rourke this week, have you?
Not much, have you?
Yeah, because Cruz is up by 9 points, most likely, probably more. I mean, Trump went there. Him and Cruz made up, kissed and made up. Cruz is going to, no pun intended, Cruz is going to cruise to victory. And they know this, okay? And Beto has enriched himself enormously in terms of the way they were able to sell this as a possible win for them. So now, for better or worse, Ted, their attention has turned to Florida. And now Gillum is their big hope. Gillum is everything to them. And Tom Steyer, as I told you in our last show, has contributed an additional $5 million to Gillum's campaign. Now, what do they do with that $5 million? Now, here's an interesting question, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are getting really tired, as am I, of getting constant emails and come-ons for campaign donations from the Republican Party. They write to you posing as the president. They write to you posing as DeSantis or as Scott and say, the Democrats are pouring, another $10 million against us and we need to match it. Well, I told you a year ago, I do not believe in that adage that money is the mother's milk of politics anymore. Trump proved it. Hillary outspent him, 3-1?
Oh, yeah.
I don't believe all the money in the world is going to change the tenor of the nation. And the tenor of the nation is that we are moving in the right direction. And the last thing in the world we want to do is put the brakes on this great economy.
You are so right. When we see the direction that the country has come in 2 years, when we see the people going back to work, and we talked about this earlier, it just does not make any sense how people would want to, this isn't good. We need to turn this back. We do not want that tax increase. That tax break that we got, we want to pay more taxes. How foolish do they think, the American people are? They want to keep the money that they work hard for. The only ones that don't care about it are the ones that are not working for it,
Right. And we cannot dismiss those numbers because those numbers are vast.
Yeah.
There's no question about it between government employees and union members. And when I say union members, understand the distinction I always make between private sector unions and public sector unions. I'm talking about public employee unions, which brings me to another thing that really set me off this week. I'm sure you and all your listeners, whenever a political ad comes on the TV, are very tempted to leave the room or hit the mute button. I mean, these ads are as lame as anything I've ever seen in my life, okay?
You bet.
And it goes to what I said a few moments ago where I said, where is this money? Where is Tom Steyer's $5 million contribution to the Andrew Gillum for Governor campaign going? It's going to yard signs because they're not afraid to put up their yard signs because they know we are not cut of the kind of fabric where we're gonna egg somebody's house because of a yard sign they've got in front that we don't agree with. That's not who we are, okay? So that money is going to yard signs and TV ads and lame TV ads that nobody wants to see during their football game or their World Series game. When those political ads come on, I guarantee you everybody cringes, hits the mute button, or goes to the bathroom, okay?
Absolutely.
So it's money down the drain. And I don't believe, and this is the other component to this that we cannot allow to escape us as we're trying to track all these elements together, Ted, is the fact that these elections are big business for another cottage industry, which is the electioneering business. These are the people that sell ad buys. This is the media again.
God. There you go.
This is how the media stays afloat, is selling ads every 2 years for these things. So the bottom line is that there's a cottage industry of so-called paid political consultants that run around basically trying to get us to donate supposedly to the candidate, when in reality all we're doing is donating to them to sell these ads or buy these ads, and they take a percentage of each transaction for themselves. And that's how an idiot like Mike Miller, who managed every campaign he's ever managed, we've lost. Okay, and yet he still comes on Fox News every week to tell us what Trump is doing wrong. Okay, people like this have become multi-millionaires off this. So the bottom line is this election coming up could potentially be Mike Tyson versus Michael Spinks circa 1988, a 30-second knockout. Okay. But at the time, it was the most purchased pay-per-view fight in recorded history.
Yes, indeed.
My point is that these, on both sides of the aisle, this goes on both sides, they're like Don King. They're basically promoting this epic fight, trying to sell and raise their pay-per-view buys, by which, the mechanism we just outlined.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make any difference. The outcome is already decided, is my contention.
Brilliant analysis. Brilliant. I'm so glad you were able to lay it out like that, because it gets back to the media, self-sustaining, the money that they're getting for this, and for those, you've laid it out. I've never heard anybody say this and lay it out this way before. So brilliant. I mean, my gosh, folks. open your ears, open your ears, and open your minds. Aaron, thank you so much for that insight. That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. This is WVRN broadcasting from Zephyr Hills, Florida. Veterans Radio Ministry is a ministry of Great Hope Christian Fellowship Church in Tampa, Florida. We're also very excited about having our own broadcast studio and programming, and it's very easy to get to our programming. Tell your folks, tell your friends out there about us. Just go to the internet and put in Veterans Radio Ministry. It's all one word, veteransradioministry.com, and you can click on the Listen Live button and click one more time, and you'll be able to listen to this 24/7, 365. VRM, Veterans Radio Ministry, broadcasting from the WVRM studios in Zephyr Hills, Florida, USA. Aaron, we've got a few minutes left. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. If you would, I'd like for you to go ahead and wrap it up for us. And I mean, what you just said was outstanding. Outstanding, brother. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I mean, a lot of this stuff percolates over time for
Yeah.
all of us,
Yeah.
and it's difficult to see the forest through the trees or whatever metaphor you want to use. But the bottom line is I think the writing on the tombstone of the 2018 election has already been written. I believe that it was probably written some time ago based on all the factors that we've covered to this point, thus the title of our show today, Self-Fulfilling Prophecy. There's two things, though, that are noteworthy and worth adding, which is that, as you pointed out, we cannot count on this, though. I don't want to give anybody a false sense of security.
Yes,
Turnout
yes.
is everything. It always has been everything. It always will be everything so long as we have free elections in this country. Andrew Gillum is a very dangerous person, and we do not need a governor like Andrew Gillum in the state of Florida. It is imperative, even though I believe that there are a lot of people that were very much behind his opponent in the primary, Adam Putnam, who's a fine man, by the way, that are disappointed that it's DeSantis. But we must vote for DeSantis. He has the credentials. He doesn't have necessarily the greatest television personality, I will grant you. And ditto, as you know from prior shows, I share that same sentiment vis-a-vis Governor Scott.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, if you just took two pieces of paper and you wrote the respective credentials of each candidate on either side of the page, it would be a no-brainer for any logical thinking person, irrespective of whether they've got an R next to their name or a D next to their name, at least until the latest iteration of the Democrat Party turning into what it's turned into. And Trump even made an offhand statement about that in last night's rally, where he really said, what is Republican? What is conservative? People constantly accuse me of not being conservative enough. And we've got these catchphrases, and it's a trap in and of itself. And he says, this is simple logic that I'm talking. This is common sense is what I'm bringing to you people. Would you not agree? And the crowd erupted. And that is what I want people to keep in mind. You may not necessarily love everything about the candidate, but just use your God-given common sense to make an educated decision, irregardless of party affiliation or whether they've got a D or an R next to their name. Who has the credentials for the job, who's going to do the best job, and who is going to serve our state in the best possible way? And I think the answer will be obvious to all concerned.
Well said, Aaron. Before we go, Aaron, briefly, I want to introduce folks. Aaron's going to be having his own standalone show here. It'll be a half-hour show, and it's called No Excuses. And Aaron, looking forward to be able to listen to your new show that's coming up, and that'll be one of our feature shows that we have here on WVRM. And Aaron, once again, my friend, thank you so much for coming by today and spending the time to talk with us. And you be careful out there in all your work. And know this, Aaron, that you're loved, and we pray for you all the time, brother, that you stay safe. And we just thank God that you've come into our life to be able to help us with this radio ministry when it comes to being able to tell the truth and stand out there and make some things clear to those out there that may have some cloudy clouds that they can't get through. You're the radar that's directing them to that landing port. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Ted.
Hi, this is Pastor Ted Marshall. Thank you for listening to the Last Patrol Radio Show. The Last Patrol Radio Show is a production of Veterans Radio Ministries. Veterans Radio Ministries is a ministry of Great Hope Christian Fellowship Church in Tampa, Florida. You can reach us by going to veteransradioministries.com. Again, that's veteransradioministries.com. If you'd like to contact us, please do so. Thank you for supporting and thank you for listening to the Last Patrol Radio Show. Tell your friends about it, email your friends about it, text them, Twitter, tweet, whatever you do, but spread the word of Jesus Christ. Thank you for listening to The Last Patrol.
We were proud to call him brother. We were proud of what he'd done. Would it have been any different if America had won? Not too late to thank him or tell him that you miss him. You can tell him that you love him. Touch his name upon the wall. One of a million unsung heroes whose story forever goes untold.